Good morning from the wonderful islands in the Caribbean, a beautiful sunny day. And today I wanted to share something that I'm really passionate about. But first I'd like to mention that this is my opinion, and an opinion is like a butt cheek and we all have two, so bear that in mind. Today's video I want to talk about the controversial subject of refugees going to America. Now, this refugee status, I am South African. I left South Africa many years ago. I wouldn't say that I am one of these people that are extremely patriotic. I don't have anything for or against South Africa. However, I just wanted to bring up this point. So to start this off, I just wanted to start off with some facts. Now, in this wonderful new world today, it is so easy, which I don't understand how people cannot have the facts when we have these AI amazing inventions like Google and ChatGPT and so on. But anyway, getting straight down to the nitty-gritty and the facts. In South Africa currently, there is 62 million people. That is the census from 2022. Of the 62 million people, 7.3% of these people are whites. So being 4.5 million people are white South Africans. And of these, they estimate that 2.6 million of these people are Afrikaans-speaking people. And it is estimated that around 30 to 40,000 of these Afrikaans white-speaking South Africans are farmers. Now, first of all, I would like to bring something up. My family, my descendants originally came from France apparently, and their roots have been traced back to South Africa before the 1740s. So 1740s is when our family roots were traced back. However, I always mention to people that white people were never invited to Africa. White people weren't invited to Europe, not to Europe. White people were invited to Africa. White people weren't invited to Australia. Neither were they invited to the Americas. They pretty much explored, invaded, however you want to go about it, but they went to all these different areas. So I've always said, growing up as a South African, I've really suffered the disadvantages of traveling with a South African passport. I need visas. I always joke and say I need a visa to go back to South Africa. Anyway, it's always been it's been difficult for me to get around the world, getting visas and all that with a South African passport. And if I went back to South Africa, it's really difficult for me to open a business or do a lot of things because they've changed. However, I am not negative about this. In the end, it is their country and our forefathers and that invaded Africa, and now they have had their vote, and Nelson Mandela did a wonderful job, and now they've all got their votes and they rule their country. So South Africa belongs to them, and should you choose to live in South Africa, then you need to abide by their rules and whatever laws or rules they come up with. So getting back to this whole genocide thing, I personally haven't lived through South Africa through this. However, I have children and grandchildren that live in South Africa. I have friends that are still there, and they paint a completely different story to the one being painted by the two presidents, President Elon Musk and President Donald Trump. So the whole genocide, they're taking people's land, they're killing people. Yes, there's been murders, just like any other country. But in actual fact, if you get into the rates of murders of actual farmers that have been murdered compared to people that are killed by hijacking and other crimes in South Africa, it is extremely low. Yes, there's talks about land being repurposed. Now, once again, we've got to get, this has happened all over the world. It happens in America. The Indians are given back their land, which is their original birth land or whatever. The same thing is happening in South Africa. They're talking and discussing about possibly finding, was there any original lands, be it the grave sites or the original place where the tribes used to own that was taken by the white people, and talks of should this possibly be a white Afrikaans farm giving this land back. How this is going to happen, they haven't decided. They haven't actually done anything. No land has actually been grabbed. No land has actually been taken yet. And in actual fact, the white Afrikaans farmers are extremely patriotic. Now I wanted to mention this. I believe that you will see magna refugees in Russia before you see true Afrikaans farmer refugees in America. Sure, Afrikaners, you may see some footage of Afrikaners saying you'll see them saying thank you to Trump for recognizing their situation. And this is true. They want Trump to recognize their situation. They are looking for assistance in the matter, but they are not looking to be given refugee status in another country. They're basically just saying that should this land grab happen, should their land be taken from them, they would appreciate assistance from outside world or from anywhere. They do not want to be taken from their land and put into another country where effectively they don't even speak the language. Afrikaners are extremely proud. They love their language, they love their land, they love their lifestyle. And they don't want to be going to America, which, funny enough, they are not really pro to, because Afrikaners are actually quite religious and very conservative. So the American lifestyle is in fact not what the Afrikaner lifestyle would like. So all this being said, let's go back to the numbers. So we've already said there's around 30 to 40,000 Afrikaner farmers in South Africa currently. Now, Donald Trump comes and says, oh, you've been persecuted, you have such a terrible land, come live in South Africa, come live in America, the greatest country in the world according to him, and we will give you refugee status. And what do we get? We get 53 people that go. Maybe there's more applying and all the rest of it, but 53, not even 530, not 5,300, 53. So let's take it to the extreme. Let's say there's actually 500 people that have applied for refugee status. It's a minuscule amount. They don't want to go to America. For them, America is not the greatest country in the world. Sure, assistance, not have a farm taken, assistance and not great. Now, another thing I wanted to address, and I'm going to include the photos here to this. This is another controversial subject. The self-proclaimed ruler of the universe, Elon Musk, with his salute. Now, there was a group of people in South Africa, or party, or a resistance organization, which was a far-right white supremacist system called the Afrikaans-speaking, which basically translated means the Afrikaans resistant movement. And as you can see by the photos I'm putting here, their salute was very similar to the Nazi salute, the Sieg Heil, where they would tap their chest and put their right hand out. Exactly the same salute as apparently Elon Musk did out of mistake or because he's autistic. He's not autistic, he's not anything, he's just downright evil. But that being said, it's just how funny how he comes from Afrikaans roots. He actually grew up extremely wealthy, so the whole story of him being poor is all a lie, as his father's even said. He grew up in an area in Pretoria, Waterkloof, which was very Afrikaans, extremely, very AWB prone. There was a lot of Afrikaans weerstand they're situated around Pretoria. So now we go back into all of this. Now we've got this Elon Musk fella who comes from Afrikaans white supremacist roots, who now manages to mind control Donald Trump, and all of a sudden, Donald Trump, I don't even think knew South Africa was a country, let alone there was white farmers or anything there. And all of a sudden now they're being given this refugee status. And I mean, honestly, if anybody can tell me that this is not coincidence, you've got a white supremacist talking in his ear all the time, and now all of a sudden they're giving refugee status. Now, don't get me wrong. There was a time in my life where I would have given my left leg to get legal status in America. And over time in my life, I actually did have legal status in America, and I chose not to follow that through and get a passport for my own personal reasons. I don't live in South Africa, I don't live in America. Both countries have amazing qualities, both countries have problems. I'm not saying either one are better or either worse. I've chosen a place where I want to live because I like the peace and the people, and that's where I stay. So back to this whole refugee status thing. If you actually take a look at the people that landed in America, first of all, they're far from hungry, and they're not starving. And there's something else I'd like to address. In South Africa, after the apartheid era fell, so the whites did control a lot of the power. White areas were better than a lot of the black areas. There was a lot of very, very rich black South Africans too. However, with the shift in power, there was a shift where there were certain rules, certain organizations put in place where they had to equal the power. So black people had to be given more access to better jobs and all the rest of it. So there was a little bit of, and there still is today, I would say maybe a little bit of reverse racism, if you go with that, where you had to have so many black people working for you, or you'd have tax implications, and there was a bunch of things. But let's get real, they had to balance the power. Something had to happen, something had to change. After many years of the apartheid ruling, you had to somehow put things back. It's kind of like when, for example, animals, like you go in there and you kill all the lions, for example, then all of a sudden you have an antelope growth. You'll have to go out and cull the antelope, which is not nice, but you have to do it. There's been times in Africa where they've had to cull elephants because there was nothing killing the elephants, and the elephants are destroying everything, all the plants and that for the other animals. So taking that as considering these things, it's the same with these things, that black people needed to get back some of the power. So this happened. And when this happened, there was a fair amount of white people that suffered, who lost their jobs, but in fact they were living a privileged lifestyle. So we're not going to get into the wheres and wheres, but yes, the fact of the matter was there wasn't anything like homeless areas, homeless developments for white people. That was very much your black or your colored communities who were homeless, who lived in shanty towns. So when this whole shift in power came, there was a lot of lower, middle to lower class white people that lost their jobs, lost their houses, and all of a sudden there was an upspringing of homeless shanty towns full of white people in South Africa. Now, for whatever reason this may be, I don't know the actual demographics of it, but from the general perspective, a lot of these homeless shelters were more Afrikaans white people. Of course there was white, but it was more the Afrikaans people that came in here. And this is also maybe because there was a lot of Afrikaans people that were manual laborers that lost their jobs. I don't know the actual demographics of it. However, if you want to go into YouTube and you go into, there's a bunch of documentaries been done about it. Now, not being a South African, you may not know or recognize, but being a South African, it's easier for me to recognize whether these people in these shanty towns are white, white, of course we can see if they're white or not, are English or Afrikaans descent. So I can tell that most of them are Afrikaans descent. So people are like, oh, shame, these poor white Afrikaners who are now living in shanty towns. However, the white Afrikaners are also the people that invented and put apartheid into power. So I don't really feel sorry for them that they maybe are the ones that suffer, because they are the people that invented it and put it into power in the first place. So I was very much an anti-apartheid person, and I'm anti any human beings putting down another human being, whether it's in Europe, Australia, China, North Korea, or America. I don't believe that any human being has the power to put down or abuse another person. So in these homeless shelters and these communities, I've watched a lot of the documentations, and recently when I went back to South Africa a year ago, I actually went to one of these white homeless things just to have a look. And it's actually, a lot of it has got nothing to do with work or the rest of it. It comes down to alcoholism, and there's a drug in South Africa called tick, which is extremely addictive and extremely bad. So when you go into these homeless communities, you see a large amount of these people addicted to tick, kind of like your crackheads in a lot of American cities and towns in these homeless communities. Now, people, oh, shame, these people are drug addicts, shame, these people are alcoholics, and you're going to maybe people say, oh, they've only become like that because they've lost their jobs. Okay, I call, BS, all of that, because if you're really hungry and you've really lost your job and you're really this, if you want to turn to alcoholism and drugs to take your problems, I'm sorry, I'm not the person to cry on your shoulder. There's a million other people that are going to feel sorry for you and go looking after you because you've got addictive personalities. I don't really care. Okay, if you want to go and take drugs and be an alcoholic and be homeless and your family suffer, it's on you. I have no sympathy for you. So now these refugees that have been taken into America, are these farmers or these white Afrikaners from these white homeless shelter areas? Just looking at them, to be honest with you, I find it hard-pressed they're farmers. Now, land in South Africa is extremely valuable still. Nobody to date has had their farms taken away from them in this current talk of genocide or land grabs. So even if these so-called farmers that were taken into America were farmers, what did they do with their farms? Because it wasn't taken by the government. Did they sell them? Did they really have farms? Were they really farmers? Because come on, if they had sold their farms, they would have had a lot of money. So why do they need to be refugees in America? So I find this whole thing wrong, and during this whole time when South Africa was going through the apartheid era, fair enough, Donald Trump wasn't president, but how come Americans didn't offer refugee status to the black people that were being persecuted, that were being tortured in South Africa during the apartheid era? They weren't given refugee status. So why now are we giving refugee status to white supremacists who took over a country, introduced the evil system called apartheid, and now that apartheid has been taken back by the vote, and really a one man, one vote, not a we vote in a person who votes for us like some other countries voting system. South Africa is a one man, one vote, and that took place, and 7.6% of the country is white. So of course the black people took over and won the vote. Now there's a change in South Africa currently taking place in the last election. In actual fact, it was a predominantly white party that won the Western Cape, which is a larger part of South Africa. So there's a lot of democratics going on about the actual ruling parties and the different things in South Africa. However, it's South Africa's problem, and me as a white person, I chose to leave South Africa because I didn't agree with the apartheid era. I took my chances. I effectively don't have a country. If I go back to South Africa, sure, I'll go back there, I have a passport, but I don't have anything there. I have nothing. I don't even know how the country works. So if you're in South Africa, and if you're a farmer in South Africa, and if you're being persecuted, and if this land grab is going to take place, sure, you are asking for Donald Trump, whoever, to give you assistance to save your land, and if sure, there have been land murders, farmers murders, like I mentioned, but there's also people being carjacked every day in South Africa, both white, colored, everything. Here's the statistics on how many people are murdered in South Africa in the cities. So why doesn't Donald Trump give refugee status to all people that are suffering from crime in South Africa? However, because of self-proclaimed ruler of the universe, Elon Musk, who has whispered in his ear saying, oh, these poor white farmers are being genocide and we need to look after them, and come on, my big friend Donald Trump, give my white supremacist family members or people refugee status in South Africa while I give my Nazi hail sick IWB salute to the world and run around a stage with a chrome chainsaw, like, oh, this is so humane, and then, oh, cry, why is everybody being so nasty to me? Why does everybody hate my Tesla? Whatever. It's absolutely pathetic, and I don't believe, and I can guarantee you that majority of South Africans who watch this all over the world will agree with me, and that this refugees thing is a load of BS. Offer white South Africans refugee status in South Africa? Sure, go ahead, but don't make it white Afrikaans farmers who are being persecuted, because that's BS. You want to give white people from South Africa refugee status? I still think this is extremely racist and BS. But sure, but you're busy kicking people out, and you're busy throwing people that have legal status into another country, high pretender jail. Like, you're not even sending them back to their home country, you're sending them to another country and putting them in a terrible prison. Look, don't get me wrong, I'm not for gangsters and I'm not for any of that, and the whole C-cot prison thing I get and I understand there was maybe a read for it, but the long and the short of it is you cannot take people and send them back to a country that they don't belong to, but that's a whole different story. Another thing that I've seen a lot of people quoting about these refugees in South Africa, and they're going, oh, why don't they send them back to the Netherlands? That's their home country. Well, I hate to tell you, Americans, that these people from Netherlands and France and all other countries were in South Africa and farming in South Africa long before America was even discovered, long before the first red Indian was ever killed by the white invaders. So they have more rights to be in South Africa than Americans have rights to be in America. So before these people say, oh, send these people back to Netherlands, that would be like saying, well, let's send Americans back to Ireland. So if somebody commits a crime or anything in England, in America now, don't send them back to prison, send them back to Ireland and send them back to Germany, send Donald Trump back to Eastern Europe, wherever he comes from, send Elon Musk back to South Africa. So the refugee status is BS. Afrikaans farmers in South Africa don't want to go to America. The genocide that has been spoken about isn't happening. Is there threats of it? Possibly, but it isn't happening now. So that's my take on it. And like I started this, my opinion, which is like a butt cheek, and everybody has two. I don't wish any harm or any death to anyone, not white South Africans, not black South Africans, not Afrikaans South Africans, not Italian South Africans, not German South Africans, no South Africans. I don't wish any harm to any Americans, anybody. Just peace, but treat everybody equally. So that's pretty much what I wanted to just bring up and talk about. Is I don't agree that white supremacist South Africans should be rewarded for suffering the defeat of apartheid. So finally, yes, I don't believe that white Afrikaans South Africans should be rewarded in any way for suffering or reaping the results of an apartheid era, which was invented by white Afrikaans South Africans, and sure, there was English-speaking South Africans that supported it too. However, apartheid is Afrikaans word for separation. So now that the whole world has come crumbling down around them, and the people that they jailed, persecuted, tortured, jailed without courts, did terrible things to, have taken over their own country and taken back their country, they shouldn't be rewarded in any way. Sure, like I said, they're not from the Netherlands, but you know what? They should find a way to go back to Europe where they came from if they're not happy in South Africa. Alternatively, they need to find a way to learn to live with the ruling parties in South Africa. And if that means that they have to lose a farm that originally belonged to a tribe that lived there, well, you know what? You stole it initially. Your family invaded it and they're taking it back. And you know what? If you really wanted it, you should have kept power. You should have done whatever you wanted to do back in the day. And I don't want people crying either saying, oh, it wasn't me, it was my forefathers, it wasn't there. It wasn't that long ago. I'm 57 years old and I lived through apartheid. So any of these farmers that you see, the refugee status, you don't see any of them being 20 or 30 years old. So they all lived in the apartheid era. They all had a part of it. They grew up in the apartheid era, and I can guarantee you that they don't feel the same as I feel about all black and white people. That I can guarantee you. So apartheid, invented by white Afrikaans South Africans, collapsed, and who are suffering? Sure, English-speaking South Africans. I'm suffering. My father actually is from an Afrikaans family. My last name is Afrikaans. My mother's British. I was brought up English, but I have Afrikaans blood in me. And my father, like I said, was extremely Afrikaans. It's just, you know what? Africa belonged to Africans. White people invaded Africa. White people ultimately lost Africa back to the black people. I hate using this term white and black, just by the way. So when I'm using white and black, I'm using this as a descriptive, not as anything else. So Africans now have, am I a South African? I mean, come on, my family was there in the 17th century. What am I? My mom's British, my dad's Afrikaans, and his family are originally from France. So what am I? You know what I mean? I can't get a French passport. I can't get a British passport. I've got a South African passport, and I'm basically, I don't want to live there, but I don't cry about it. I support South Africans 100%. It's their country, and whether they destroy it through corruption or crime, it's their choice. It's their country to destroy. If they make it a success, fantastic. It's their country to make a success. If they want to make a law stating that they're going to take back land that originally belonged to them, it's their country. That's the law they can make. If you're not happy with it, leave. If you can't leave, then you have to deal with it. And, or, you know what, now you have an option. Go jump on the Donald Trump refugee status and run to America. All right, guys, that's me, over and out. Enough negativity. Love you all, peace to you all. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I'm sorry if I upset anybody, that's not my intentions. It was just my opinion. So cheers for now.